We are online. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Revelation class. We were having a few technology problems this morning. We hope the technology holds in with us during the next hour, and we hope you're blessed with hearing the entire class today. We're doing Revelation, the book of Revelation. We're currently in class number 40, and today we're going to study Revelation. Oops, that says Revelation 8. It should say Revelation 17, 1 through 8. We're going to study the first 8 verses of chapter 17. The story is known as the woman and the beast, or the woman on the beast, but I'm actually going to rename it the destruction of spiritual Babylon, because I think it follows with what we talked about last week. So we have 7 angels that just got done pouring out the bowl judgments on the world, and now God is ready to deal with Babylon. And Babylon, we talked about last week as a concept that flows through the entire Bible ever since the beginning. But we looked at 5 different ways Babylon is used in the Bible, and today I'm going to look at 3 of those. The 3 I'm going to look at is what we call spiritual Babylon, and that spiritual Babylon is the home of sin. That's where sin began. That's where sin is kind of headquartered today. It's where it will definitely be headquartered during the period of the Antichrist, the period of the beast. Babylon is the headquarters for idolatry, where idol worship began. It began at the Tower of Babel. That's where Babylon got its name from, was the Tower of Babel. And it's the home of false religions. False religions have plagued the world for thousands of years. They've caused untold damage in the world, untold damage to people, to their hearts and their souls and their lives. And false religions began in Babylon, and they are everywhere in the world today. We see false religions in all kinds of things. People believe in all kinds of weird stuff today. They believe in, I'm getting some nods and some laughing from that. Yeah, people today believe in money as a religion, as a god. They believe in power as a religion, as a god. If you don't believe me, go to Washington or go to some of these places where power is a big issue. They believe in causes, whatever that cause might be. It might be naturalism, or it might be some political cause or some political candidate or whatever. People substitute a lot of stuff, of causes and politics and stuff for God. It becomes their God. It becomes the thing they really worship in this world. These days we see more people worshiping technology. That never used to be an issue. But today we see a lot of people who almost have a worship relationship with technology. And all the false gods are out there too. There are other religions all around the world, and those religions are out there, and people are worshiping false gods rather than the one true God. So what we've seen is what we're seeing now is we're coming into Babylon. Babylon, as I say, is the spiritual side of Satan, the spiritual things that he has done in the world. Next week we'll look at the physical, well, not next week, but a couple of weeks we'll look at the physical things that he's doing in the world. So let me start by reading you the first 2 verses here. This is Revelation 17, verses 1 and 2. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, excuse me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." So we finished the 7 bowl judgments. John's sitting there, he's still pretty stunned by this. And one of the angels who poured out the bowl judgments on the earth comes up to him and starts talking to him and says, "Come on, we're going to take a look at the great prostitute, the great harlot." And first of all, he says, "Come here." And "come here" is like, come here. Come. It means he's summoning John. He's summoning John to come look at something. And we're going to find out what he's summoning him to look at. And that is the great harlot, the great prostitute. Now, right now, we don't know who that harlot is, but it will be defined later on. We're going to see it later on today when we get to 17:5. And so I'll give you the answer now. The great harlot, or the great prostitute, is Babylon. And Babylon, as we said, is the spiritual, as it's going to be used today, is the spiritual side of Satan. It is sin, it is idolatry, it is false religion. So it's the spiritual side of Satan. Now, the angel tells him that this great harlot sits on many waters. Now, again, it's being used here, but it won't be explained until later. Next week, when we get to 1715, it might even be the week after next, when we get to 1715, we're going to see that many waters means peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So this prostitute, this harlot that we're going to see today, sits on. In other words, she dominates many peoples around the world. She dominates many multitudes of peoples. She dominates many nations, many countries. She dominates many languages. So this prostitute, this spiritual side of Satan, the sin, the idolatry, the false religion, dominates large portions of our planet, is what's being said here when he says sits on many waters. We'll actually get a better description of that when we get to Revelation 17:15, but we're not quite there today, but I wanted to make sure you understand today what's going on. So this harlot, this spiritual Babylon, is riding atop this beast. And that means that, is riding atop these peoples, these multitudes, these waters. And that means that this harlot is dominating them. In other words, people have given their lives to this stuff. There are people we see in our world today giving their lives to money, people giving their lives to power, to false gods, whatever. They are dominated by this spiritual side of Satan. That's what's being said here with these words. So when it says she's riding atop the people, this spiritual side of Satan is dominating people today. We see that everywhere in our world. We all deal with it in our own lives, but in some people's lives, it's just out of control. It's got their lives. It's controlling their lives. So spiritual Babylon controls most of the peoples of the earth. Everybody except Israel, and today the church, but the church will be gone by that point. So at this point, everybody except Israel is in spiritual Babylon. And that group of people has a name, and that name is the Gentiles. So in the world, you can either be a Jew or you can be a Gentile. The Jews have a connection with God, with the one true God. The Gentiles do not. And at this point in time, the believing church, or we are Gentiles because we are not Jews, but the believing church will be gone at the rapture. So we are gone. And we're talking about a time when there are Jews and there are Gentiles that are not believing Gentiles left in the world. Just to put up here where we are, I usually do that on the map. I forgot to do it this morning. We are right here. We are just immediately before the second coming. So that's where we are in today's class. So we're right at that point where Jesus is about to come back, but he hasn't quite gotten there yet. He's about to come back, though. So spiritual Babylon is driving people toward false religion, toward idolatry, toward sin. Now, there's a relationship that's being talked about here in verse 2. Let me get back and read verse 2 again. Verse 2 says, with her, that would be spiritual Babylon, with her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. So what we're saying here is there's a malignant kind of relationship here between spiritual Babylon and the rulers of the earth. That over time, they've figured out how to work together. Over time, kings, political leaders, whatever, have figured out how to use false religions to control people, and how to use false religions to make themselves richer, and how to use false religions to make themselves more powerful. So they've figured out how to use false religions to do that. We see that everywhere in the world today. We see everywhere. We see false religions. We see people in power using false religions to make themselves more powerful and to make themselves richer and to dominate people and to control people and to make people do what they want them to do. It's been going on since the beginning of time. It's happening today all over the world. So that's what they're talking about here when they talk about this terrible relationship that this spiritual Babylon has with the kings of the earth. And that would be political leaders and military leaders to some extent as well. Less so military leaders here in our country, but in some parts of the world, military leaders are the political leaders. So it's led to great immorality as the leaders have dominated the people with all this false religion and pushed all this false religion on them. We see it all around us today. Can't open the newspaper today without hearing a story about something, whether it be climate change or whatever it is that somebody wants us to consider more important than God. They're constantly pushing false kinds of religions at us. And for the last 2,600 years, that has led to great immorality. And the last 2,600 years has been, again, what we call the times of the Gentiles, the times when the Gentiles have dominated Israel, and that time is coming to an end in a couple of days at this point when we get here. It comes to an end at the time of the second coming. Now, the people of the earth have suffered very greatly under this. They've suffered greatly under spiritual Babylon. They've suffered greatly from sin. They've suffered greatly from false gods, from idolatry, and they've suffered greatly from leaders who are forcing all of that stuff on them, who are pushing them into a world of sin and idolatry and false religion. So the people of earth have suffered greatly from that, and they've suffered greatly for 2,600 years. And it goes on in verse 2 to say that Babylon's immorality, the immorality of this harlot, this prostitute, has been so great that the people have behaved like they're drunk. When you think about people that are drunk, they're not in control of themselves, right? Who knows what they're doing? They may be doing anything. It may be really stupid stuff. And people who are drunk don't do the most sensible, smartest stuff in the world. We see people who are drunk driving in ways that are not safe. We see people behaving sexually in ways that are not safe when they're drunk. We see, we can just see it in people slurring of their voices and whatnot, that when people are drunk, they're not on top of their game. They're just not with it. They're not correct on what they're doing. So spiritual Babylon has got the people drunk to the point where they're into all of this immorality. And they indulge themselves in this immorality because sin sounds like it's fun. And getting into false religion sounds like it's fun. All these causes sound like, gee, isn't that a great cause? We'll save, we'll go with that cause today. We're gonna, save the snail darter or whatever today's particular cause is that we need to do. That cause sounds like a great one. We just need to do it. When you look at people that are drunk, sometimes it almost looks like they can be possessed by demons. I've been around enough drunk people who've been misbehaving that you can kind of see something that's almost a little demonic sometimes in their behavior. And we're seeing that in this verse as well. That what's being talked about is that this harlot, this prostitute, is behaving in a way that's almost demonic. That she is behaving in a way that's almost demonic with how she's working with people. She's not thinking clearly, and the people who are following her are not thinking clearly, just like people who've had too much to drink aren't thinking clearly. Today, in John's day it was drink. Today we also have all these drugs that people are on. Many people who are on these drugs are not thinking clearly either, and they can go off into a state where their brain just isn't thinking properly. Now, John describes this woman as being a harlot or a prostitute. And the question got asked last week, why do women get picked out for these things? And the answer is, interestingly enough, that in the scriptures, women are commonly used to symbolize religious systems And that can be for good and for evil. For example, Israel is called the wife of God in the scriptures. The church is called the bride of Christ. Nothing personal against women, just that in the scriptures, religious systems can take on a female term in the scriptures. Now, why a harlot? Why a prostitute? The answer is that a prostitute or a harlot is a perfect representation of false religion. It's exactly what a false religion is. A harlot is an illegitimate, or a prostitute is an illegitimate counterfeit wife to a person. It's a person who gives the illusion of a marriage. You have the illusion that you're married, that everything's going great, but there's no substance to it. There's no reality to it. So, harlot's a good picture of idolatry. It looks like the real thing, but it isn't. It's a good picture of false gods and false religions. It looks like the real thing, but it isn't the real thing. And we talked last week about the people with the bumper stickers that say coexist and whatnot. You know, there's a sense, where this leads to is a sense that if you look at false religions and say they're okay, everything's fine about them, pretty soon you ask the question, well, is there anything different between the one true God and all these false religions? And it's easy to get yourself into that position if you're into false religions. So the relationship with a prostitute is a false relationship. It's not a covenant with the one true God. Now, interestingly enough, John calls her the great harlot or the great prostitute, which means she's not just an average harlot or an average prostitute. She's the great one. She is the biggest one in the world. The most important one in the world is this here, spiritual Babylon. Sin, idolatry, false religion is the biggest prostitute in the world. Now, the angel goes on in these verses and says that the leaders of the earth fornicate with her. The people become drunk on her immorality. So she's drunk, she's immoral, but the people become drunk on her immorality. So I talked earlier about how world leaders have traditionally used religions to build their power base with people. And when people come under the influence of false religions, they lose their sense. They lose their senses. Now, Paul tells us this in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 3 through 4. Let me read that to you. And even if our gospel is veiled, in other words, even if our truth is hidden, if God's truth is hidden, it is veiled to those who are perishing. So it's not veiled to us. We're studying it. It's veiled to people who are perishing. In whose case the God, notice God with a small g, in whose case the God of this world, that would be Satan, has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So what Paul's saying here is that false religions deceive people, and they get to the point where they become so blinded that they can't even see the true religion. They just can't even understand the real message of Christ. We all know people in our lives that are at that point where they're just so deceived that they can't understand the true message of Christ. Let me move on next to verse 3. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so first of all, now this harlot has a new mysterious form. This harlot, we heard she's a harlot, a prostitute. Now we find out that she's a woman sitting on top of a beast. Now, John takes her into the desert, into the wilderness, and she's riding the beast. She's on top of the beast. The beast, first of all, is scarlet. That's its color. Scarlet, we all know, is the color of sin in the Bible. We all remember the scarlet letter. I had to read that in high school. Scarlet is the color of sin. So Satan, this beast we're going to find out in a minute is Satan, is the color of sin. He is scarlet. He is bright red. This beast has blasphemous names on it. This beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, and it has 10 crowns on the 10 horns. So this beast, as we saw earlier, is a dragon. The dragon, if you remember, dragons have horns on their tails. This has 10 horns, and each horn has a crown on it. We're going to find out next week what all that means, but right now that's what he's seeing. He's seeing this dragon that has this long, long tail that has 10 horns on it, and each horn has a crown on top of it. In addition to that, the dragon doesn't just have 1 head, it has 7 heads. We're going to find out next week the significance of that as well. But at this point, he's just seeing this beast for the second time. He actually saw it, actually the third time. He saw it once before in chapter 12, and in chapter 13 he saw it as well. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because we saw it in chapter 13, verse 1. Let me read you that again. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horn, and on each head a blasphemous name. So we see the dragon again, 10 horns, a crown on each of the 10 horns, 7 heads. Each head has a blasphemous name. We know from Revelation 13:1 who this is. We've already seen this creature before. This creature is the beast. The beast is the Antichrist who has died and has now been indwelt by Satan and brought back to life. And he died at the midpoint. So in the second half, he is now called the beast. He was called the Antichrist in the first half. Now he's called the beast. And remember, he came up out of the sea. I just read you that in the words I read you. So he's called the beast out of the sea. Later on, we're going to see specifically who this beast is. We actually know because we saw him already in chapter 13. But in verse 8, we're going to see specifically who he is. So let me move on now to verse 4. Verse 4, the woman, so this is the woman sitting on top of the beast now, right? The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold and and precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. So this woman is dressed to the nines, right? She looks like $1,000,000, so to speak, like she just came off the cover of some magazine here. But she's dressed in red again, and scarlet, so she's dressed in red. She's also dressed in red as the color of sin. She's also dressed in purple. Purple is the color of royalty. If you look at the queen, when she does her special thing, she's usually wearing purple. So purple is the color of royalty. So she's rich, sinful, royal, leadership, all those things put together into one. And she's got all these beautiful, shiny bangles, right? She's got gold and silver and precious stones and gems and all of this stuff. So she's just dressed very richly, and we know because of how she's dressed that she's very sinful as well. So that's what we know about this woman that's sitting on top of the beast. So John is describing her to us. We know that she's very rich and that she's very sinful. Now that tells you that her standing in the world and her sin has earned her great wealth. So something about her has earned her great wealth. And if we look at it, the false leaders, or the leaders of the world who are using false religions typically have great wealth. Take a look at the people in Washington, D.C. Look at how wealthy most of them are, right? They have come up with wealth over a period of time as they've used their power. Not all, but some many. And so we found that people that are into the spiritual world of Babylon tend to be wealthy in power. That's part of why they do it, is to get more wealth and more power. So this woman is spiritual Babylon. Did I read that part yet? Maybe I haven't read that yet. I'm sorry, that's in verse 5, actually. This woman is spiritual Babylon. We're going to find that out in another verse, but now I'll pre-tell you right now. We'll see it in the next verse. But this woman is spiritual Babylon. It's what we talked about up here. She is sin, idolatry, false religion. She is the spiritual side of Satan out there. Now, false religions have been around a long time. There are thousands of them in the world, right? There are thousands of things that people worship almost as a god. We talked about some of them earlier. There are thousands of things. There are some people that worship birds or worship bushes or trees or whatever. Many people worship nature. There are a lot of false religions in the world. They've been around a long, long time. But notice this woman is only writing one false religion at the end of the age. When we come to this point, where Jesus is about to come back, she's not sitting on top of a million different false religions like there are today. At this point, there's only one false religion left, and that false religion is worship of the beast. That's what's being said here, worship of Satan. So the only religion in the world that will be acceptable at this point is to worship Satan. All this other stuff is going to be gone. You're not going to be worshiping money, power, or any of that anymore. All of this, by the time we come to this point where Jesus is about to come back in a couple of days, there's only going to be one religion left in the world, and that is worshiping Satan. Only one false religion left in the world, and that is worshiping Satan. Oh, another point of this, notice that she's riding the beast. When you think of a horse and the rider, I don't do a whole lot of horseback riding, but I do have two daughters that do. And the idea of horseback riding is you and the horse kind of become as one. You know, if you're kind of going this way and the horse is going that way, it doesn't work well. The idea is you and the horse work together, you know, and work together as one. So you become as one when you're riding. So she is becoming as one with the person she's riding, and the person she's riding is Satan. So the false religions of the world are becoming as one. The spiritual side of Babylon, the religions of the world, are becoming as one with Satan. So it's becoming very, very difficult to tell the false religion apart anymore from Satan and the beast himself, which she's riding on top of. It's another interesting point there. One last point before we move off verse 4. Notice she's holding a gold cup of abominations and other unclean things. So she's holding all the evil and sin in the world in her hands, right? That's who this is. So all the evil and sin in the world comes out of the spiritual side of Babylon, out of the spiritual side of Satan. As you listen to how it phrased it in there, it sounds as though she indulges in these as though they were a drink. Like she takes pleasure in them. She's addicted to them. Let me read that part to you again. She has a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adultery. So it's almost like she's addicted to it. Now let's move on to verse 5, and we'll find out who this lady is. Verse 5 says, "The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth." So now we know who this person is. We kind of have known it all the way through, but now we know officially from John who this person is. It's a name that's written on her forehead. When was the last time we saw something about the beast written on people's foreheads, right? That was back at the midpoint of the tribulation, when the mark of the beast was forced on people as a way to get them to commit to worshiping the beast, and it's going to be written on their foreheads. So she's got the mark of the beast on her forehead. So the beast is on there, just like the mark of the beast is on the people that are following her and following the beast. It says that she's the mother of harlots, the mother of prostitutes. She's the mother of the abominations of the earth. So Babylon the Great, and she's also called Babylon the Great here. We've seen Babylon the Great before in Revelations, but I'm going to point out again. Babylon is called the Great City. Babylon the Great is here. So Babylon the Great is what she's called, and she and the beast are now one, just as we talked about the horse and the rider being one. She is now one with the beast. So at this point, false religion is completely vested in the beast. Daniel told us this was going to happen. Let's go back and look at Daniel 11, 36 through 38. Then the king, that would be the Antichrist, the beast, will do as he pleases. He can do anything he wants, right? He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. He's going to hate God, speak against God, and put himself above even the other false gods of the earth. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished. So he's going to seem to do pretty well. He's going to get a lot of money. People are going to like him. He's going to have a lot of power. He's going to seem to have that until God's ready to be done with him. For that which is decreed will be done. God has made the decision. He's already made it today. It's done. The beast is going to come to an end. His period of time is going to come to an end. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers or for the desire of women. So he's going to show no regard for anything people have worshipped before him, or for any, here the word woman is being used for religious systems, for any religious system. We talked about that earlier. Woman is being used for religious systems. So he's not going to show any regard for any of these false religious systems. At this point, the usefulness of false religious systems is over. When we get to this point, there's only one religious system, and that is worshiping the beast, worshiping Satan. All those other false religions will finally be gone from the world. That actually makes it kind of easy for Jesus when he comes back, by the way. Now he doesn't have to wipe out 1 million false religions in the world. He's just got to wipe out one person. And at that point, it's easy. And he's about to wipe out that one person when he comes back. So actually, this is setting God up very nicely for what's about to happen at the second coming. But instead, he will honor a God of fortresses, a God of defenses, a God of strength, a God whom his fathers did not know. So this will be a God that didn't exist up until, well, he did exist, but it will be a God that didn't exist until the Antichrist became the beast back in chapter 12. He will honor him with gold, silver, precious stones, and treasures. So the beast will give Satan all this honor. He will give him gold, silver, everything, all of his money, all the money of people's treasures will all go to the beast. So Daniel told us this was going to happen 2,600 years ago. He told us exactly what was about to happen right here at this point, at the point that we're in today. Daniel told us that in 11:36 to 38. Now, let me read verse 6 to you next. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. So we see that this prostitute, this woman that's sitting on top of this beast and is now one with the beast, is drunk. She's been drinking wine, but the wine she's drunk isn't really wine in the sense that we know it. It is blood, the blood of all the martyrs throughout history. So all these false religions around throughout history have martyred zillions of Christians and Jews also around the world. Zillions of God's people have been martyred over time by these false religions. We see it happening in the world today. How many missionaries do we know in the world today who are facing the possibility of martyrdom from false religions that they're trying to battle out there? This has been going on for thousands of years, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and it will get incredibly worse during this last 3.5 years of this tribulation period. It will get incredibly worse. It will be very, very, very difficult for believers during that period of time. So this woman is drunk on the blood of martyrs. She's intoxicated. She's addicted to it. This woman has a great amount of blood on her hands. Again, this woman is this stuff up here, right? Spiritual Babylon has a great amount of blood on its hands. The blood of martyrs, the blood of believers, of God's people is on her hands. False religion has been used by Satan to enslave the world for thousands and thousands of years. We talked about that earlier, that People have been controlled by false religion, and that's why false religion is so popular with people that are in power. That's why they want you to believe in some new cause or some new thing and replace God with that. They want you to believe in that that's more important than God. We see that today in our world. Satan uses false religion to persecute the saints. It's been happening for thousands of years. It's happening today around the world. So John's wondering what this woman, what do I make of this woman, right? What do I make of it? So in verse 7, the angel kind of figures that out, and the angel asks John about that. The angel tells John, let me read verse 7 first of all. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, who has 7 heads and 10 horns." So John's about to get the explanation, and we're about to get it as well. We're going to get part of it this week. We'll get the rest of it next week. But John's about to get the explanation of what all this is all about. So the angel tells John that he's going to explain the mystery of the meaning of the woman and of the beast that the woman is riding on, and all about the 10 horns and 7 crowns, or 10 crowns and 7 heads. Next week we're going to go through all of that in detail as we crawl through that piece. So this beast first appeared back in Revelation 13. Now we're finally going to get a full explanation of what all this means. We're finally going to get it. It's taken us a while. I said back in chapter 13 when this beast first came up that we're going to cover it eventually, and we are. We're going to cover it now. So what John's about to tell us is not only going to explain all that, but it's also going to explain the 4th beast in Daniel chapter 7. And the 4th beast was the beast that begins with the Roman Empire and follows the Roman Empire all the way up through today's world, and all the way up through the Antichrist. So let me read you next verse 8. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. There's actually, I forgot to put a quick one down. There's actually 5 things that are being told to us here. We are told that this beast has 5 things. First of all, it once was. Secondly, it now is not, which sounds kind of weird. Third, it yet will come. Fourth, it will come up out of the abyss. And 5th, it will be destroyed. It will go to its destruction. So what is that all talking about? What it's talking about is what we saw back at the midpoint of the tribulation, that this beast once was the Antichrist, just a human being, just like a human being like one of us. It once was the Antichrist. Now it is not. The beast was killed at the midpoint in the tribulation. Remember, he has a fatal wound on his head. He was killed at that point. So he now is not. At that point, at the midpoint of the tribulation, he ceased to exist. He yet will come. When that happened, when he died, when he had the head wound, Satan indwelt him. Satan brought him back to life like a resurrection, just similar to the resurrection of Jesus, only different. But he yet will come. So Satan brought him back to life, and now brought him back to life, as we read earlier in chapter 13, brought him back to life as the beast. We read 13:1, where he came up out of the sea. He was resurrected. He came up out of the sea, and he became the beast. And Satan indwelt him at that point. So he will come up out of the abyss. He will come out of the abyss, is the realm of Satan. He died, went to the realm of Satan, will come up, because Satan will come up out of the abyss and will indwell him. But he's going to be destroyed. That's going to happen very soon. In the next few days here, he's going to be destroyed. So that's what it means here when it says he once was, he now is not, he yet will come, he will come up out of the abyss, and he will be destroyed. Those are the 5 things that are being told to us about the whole process of how this person went from being a human being, the Antichrist, Antichrist, to being killed, to being resurrected, to being indwelt by somebody coming up out of the abyss, which is Satan, to now being destroyed by God. That's the process that we've seen that Satan is going through here as he indwells the beast. Questions on that? It's a little complicated. Okay. Now, another thing is in here. It says that people who are saved know who this person is. I mean, we know who this is. We all know who this is. But people who aren't saved, people whose names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, will be deceived by him. They will be deceived into thinking that he is God, that he should be worshipped. They will be deceived by that. We read that passage from Corinthians earlier, where where Paul talked about how things are veiled to us if we don't have faith. Things that seem obvious to us as people who have faith are veiled. That's not clear to people who don't have faith. Same thing here. So people who don't have faith, who are not in the Lamb's Book of Life, who are not saved, are going to misunderstand what's going on here. They're going to miss this completely. They're going to miss that here they are standing a couple of days away from their ultimate judgment. They're going to miss the fact that they're there. They're just not going to understand it. They're not going to know it. That's what's being said here as well. They're going to wonder, how can this beast was, is not, and is coming? What does that mean? I mean, they're going to wonder about that. They're going to have no idea what that means. So, way back in chapter 13, we learned that the beast had 10 horns, 7 heads, and 10 crowns. We learned that the beast is in complete control of the world. He's in control of the world's kingdoms, of all of its rulers. We know that Satan, we know from chapter 12 that Satan was the dragon. And in chapter 12, we saw the dragon. You'll all remember my famous picture of the dragon up here on the board. The dragon had exactly this. He had the horns and the crowns and the heads. One of those 7 heads was killed and then resurrected. That's the head that had the fatal wound on it. That's the head of the Antichrist. We're going to connect that all back over the next couple of weeks as we look back to how the Antichrist was killed. But which one of the 7 heads was he? We'll look at what the 7 heads are. We'll see which one was actually the Antichrist, who got the fatal wound and was killed and then became part of Satan after he got killed. We're going to look at all the blasphemous names. We're going to look at his resurrection. So all the way back to chapter 12, we've been wondering about this mystery, right? What is this beast? What does all this stuff mean? We are finally going to get the answers here now. It's 5 chapters later since this first came up, but we're finally going to get the answers to what all this means, and that's all going to be coming in the next week or 2. It did say that the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast. So they're going to be astonished. People who are not saved. There won't be a lot of people that are saved left at this point, but people who are not saved are just going to have no idea what's going on. They're going to completely misunderstand everything that's happening here. So that's it for this week. Next week we're going to look at a better description of this woman, this harlot, this prostitute, and a better description of the beast. And we're going to go deeper into this concept of how spiritual Babylon is being destroyed by God at this point in time. So, questions, other things people would like to know more about?
I'm kind of wondering about the saints that are going to be, their blood will be drank. Where are these saints? These aren't the ones under God's throne.
Their blood has been drunk by false religion over thousands of years. So these are people who believed in Christ, believed in God over thousands of years, were killed for that belief by people who practiced false religions and practiced idolatry. And those false religions thrived on that over all those years. That's what this woman is. She is false religion. So she drank the blood of these saints over thousands of years. These people, we're not talking about their souls here. We're talking about their physical blood, their body. I don't mean, and I don't think the Bible means literally that people drink the blood of people that they kill. That's not what it means. It means that the blood of these people has been shed, and as it gets shed, they get drunk on it. It's like the Roman Colosseum, right? People want to see more blood. When the emperor says, do we spare him or do we kill him? The crowd goes to kill him, right? The crowd wants more blood. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing people that are so drunk that it's almost like they're drunk on blood. The people really, in the Roman Colosseum, the people drank a lot before they got there and when they got there. And they were so drunk that when the emperor said, do I spare him or do I kill him? Everybody in the crowd would go, yeah, kill him, kill him, kill him. And that was how people were back then, because they were so drunk on this need for blood. Other questions? Okay, well, for those of you at home, thank you for joining us this week, and we're glad the technical problems worked out and you'll get an opportunity to see this. And join us again next week as we get into Revelation class number 41.